Tithing will keep your name enrolled among the people of God and protect you in the day of vengeance and burning.
Easter celebrations do not have that clarity because there is a widespread difference of opinion among various Christian denominations on the meaning of resurrection, literal or symbolic of something difficult to understand. For Latter-day Saints, the resurrection means that all who have ever lived will be resurrected, and the resurrection is literal.
I have faith that the Constitution will not be saved in Washington.
One, the Savior will return to the earth in power and great glory to reign personally during a millennium of righteousness and peace. Two, at the time of his coming, there will be a destruction of the wicked and a resurrection of the righteous.
In the coming day, Jesus Christ will return to the earth as the millennial Messiah, or the second coming. Do you see what is happening right before our eyes? Second coming of the Lord. Jesus Christ will govern from Old Jerusalem and the New Jerusalem, built upon the American continent.
Travis Wingitzel, too much to do. So, part 3 of the Passover series. The enemy. And then after this, I need to try to get in day 1, since it's day 1 today, for the Passion or Passover month. So, let's get right to it. There is no need for a Christ if the world is at peace and love. If there is no enemy, there is no need for a Christ. If everybody's living together, kumbaya, happiness, peace, love, joy, and whatever, everything's fine. Unfortunately, that is not the case, and it will never be until mankind kills each other off. There's a coexist bumper sticker that is in and of itself hateful. And they don't seem to understand why they are hateful when they're talking about peace, love, and coexisting together for religions, using all the symbols of the different religions to spell out coexist. And this is because they're not very bright. The Jewish Egyptians were first on earth. And then there were people that migrated up into Turkey who became the Hittites, Hatti first. And then there was Sumerians, and then Assyrians, and all the way out to China, and then to the Americas. But they were pretty much the same religion, just a different language, different names, therefore, for the different deities who could be easily transferred back and forth, with different stories to tell about them. But nonetheless, it was all the same religion. And then Emperor Sargon. King Sargon, a military leader whose capital was getting too populous for the needs of food that was on a flat plain for the farms. They were increasing in population greater than the farms that they could develop, because you got to build a city for the people to live in. And so he decided to go on military campaigns to find neighboring tribal groups and subject them to bondage and steal from them with tribute, with the promise of protection, the first protection racket. And so thus, as the city continued to grow, the need for the expansion of the empire. That's why expansionism got started. So people were unable to develop a city sufficient for its needs. And instead of having branch off cities, that they could have inner trade and thus expand and live in kumbaya peace. Nope. Let's threaten other people to take from them and put them into slave labor. That is the one true way. No. So, such is the way it is. I just adjusted this and it's now back to giving me grief. And so then you get to the point where civilizations are well developed, and it becomes necessary to be more forceful and going to war against other tribal townships, kingdoms, even though they were tributary kingdoms of a greater kingdom, because that's what the Egyptians did, is that they had people branch out, and the people were tributaries. They were specifically branched out to help supply the city, because government officials didn't want to do farming. There are other businesses that can't do farming, and so the cities got pretty large, and there's only so much they can do at the Nile. And so they continued to branch out, and they were all tributary as a result. And so that followed the Sargon practice. And only if they failed to provide tribute would war be declared. But you get encroaching kingdoms. Hittites encroaching into Egyptian Canaan, and so on and so forth. And so the Pharaoh is required to go and do battle to protect the tributaries. And and so likewise, when Assyria comes in and takes over northern Israel and does a deportation practice where they deported the northern Israelites to Assyria, and those Assyrians in that town that the northern Israelites are sent to get sent back into northern Israel, and they would become the Samaritans, as they would breed with the poor who did not go to Assyria. And so when the Jews were taken captive by Babylon, this was a more aggressive approach. This was a kidnapping and a all-out war and kidnapping and theft and rape. And so the Jews that came back were not wanting to interbreed with other people, not wanting to play nice anymore. This was the first time that real evil emerged. Because when you're a civilization and you don't understand that there might be people that want to murder you, the Sargon military just has to threaten you. But for what Babylon did was the first personification of pure hate and evil, with their militant conquering to destroy rather than allowed to live and request assistance, even if by threat, to support the growing capital. And so the first enemy of the Jews are the Babylonians. They were the ones that conquered them. And it was on 9/11, 9th Ave, 9th month, or 11th month's 9th day. As the Jews had Babylonian, it depends on which author. Some did day first, others did year or month first. And so then the Persians allowed the Jews to come out of captivity and go rebuild their temple, but they were still tributary to Persia. And then the Greeks took over. And the Greeks, again, were abusive, They destroyed the Jerusalem altar, temple altar, and rebuilt it to offer Greek sacrifices, and began prostituting women in the Jerusalem temple. This was called the Abomination of Desolation. And then you have Rome, as Rome likewise was militant, but allowed the Jews to remain kidnapped hostages in their own country, as soldiers were sent around the walls of the temple to keep an eye on them, as the Jews did not like that, and oftentimes would rise up to try to retake their land, always failing, and eventually they would get destroyed. And so during this time of Roman occupation, the Jews began to write apocalyptic literature from the Egyptian documents that they once were a part of the prophecies in the latter days of a Christ who would restore their religion, restore a temple, and live in peace for a millennium. And again, it's only because of an enemy that murders, steals, rapes, and holds hostage in bondage. And so all of the Jewish scriptures are written in this manner. There is a protagonist and there's an antagonist. They are prophecies of the latter days. They give you the days and the hours. But this is why there's the enemy that is around. So the Book of Mormon, likewise, has the same pattern as the Bible. It's also claiming to be in the learning of the Jews, like the Bible. And so there's many carryovers from the Bible in the Book of Mormon, with some additional Antichrist corridors thrown in. Not just the Lamanites and the Amalekites and defectors and traitors and apostates, who all become the enemies of latter-day prophetic type and shadow. And so Joseph Smith likewise, he's starting his religion, been going on for 8 years, and he writes his visionary accounts in 1838. And in verse 19 of the first vision, he says that he must join none of the Christian churches, for they are all wrong. And he is told that all their creeds, which means even the first one, 1700 years ago this year, are an abomination. Why? Well, it's why coexist is hateful. Because the Christians, under Roman Emperor Constantine, again, in creating a Christian religion, forcing those congregations that were scattered about in the Middle East, forcing them to come, or they won't get funding and they will be hunted down by Rome and destroyed, had to give up their religion for their separate congregation. All the congregations had a different religion. They all had a different gospel text, and all had a different interpretation of the author of the Jews of that gospel text. And so Constantine forced them all to become one, to give it all up and become one with this new religious order that he was creating. And thus God created Jesus. You cannot go back in time now and change the author's interpretation. This shouldn't be complicated, and yet Constantine was the enemy. Just like Rome, just like Greece, just like Babylon to the Jews. Because Constantine stole the Jewish scriptures, turned them all literal history, designated the name Jesus from the New Testament Gospels that Christians created, putting them in chronological order now, because they are now literal histories, not prophecies of the latter days for the Jewish Christ. And therefore turned Christians against the Jews, who were the authors of their scriptures. Because now apparently the Jews murdered Jesus, who's supernatural, i.e. not real. How did that happen again? But nonetheless, thus a second coming also was created. And Jesus, for his second coming, is going to get revenge on the earth and murder people. But wait, wasn't it the Old Testament God of wrath and murder? Jesus was a God of love. And yet now Christians are saying Jesus Christ's second coming is going to burn people to death and coup all governments of the world. Good luck finding it in Scripture. But the Jews were prophesying about this enemy that does not want to be good. And so yes, evil is easy to predict and prophesy about. I'm giving you days and hours. So that's what Joseph Smith is saying here. That it is impossible for all religions to coexist because of what the religions did to the Jews. To tell the Jews to coexist with Christianity is like telling a hostage to get along with their hostage taker, to their abuser, to their terrorist enemy. This is what we are witnessing with the war against Israel by Islam. Everybody is demanding that Israel stand down, that Israel stop it. Even their own people are saying, get our people back. What are you doing? Stop fighting and get our people back. The enemy says they're going to release hostages if you stop firing at them. Stop firing at them so we can get our loved ones back. There are just some people who apparently, I guess, never know the mind of an evil person. This is why the Jews have to go all in, to utterly destroy Gaza, Lebanon, West Bank, Yemen, until Islam is gone, exterminated, because it's very clear they are threatening Israel with extermination. Israel, Netanyahu knows this. Those in the military know this. And to have the Islamist citizens pretending to be the victims while they didn't leave the war zone. They stayed. They fought against Israel, thus giving aid and comfort to Hamas that still have hostages. The hospitals are giving cover to Hamas. The refugee camps giving cover for Hamas and the hostages. The hospital is holding hostages. The refugee camps holding hostages. The schools holding hostages. They're putting their civilians, the women, the children, on the front lines as a shield to protect Hamas, to protect the hostages from getting returned. Nobody in the press is getting this. This is just the most sickening, disgusting thing I have ever witnessed since October 7th. With the war against Ukraine, the news is all covering it accurately. But since October 7th, not a single press, except for maybe Fox News, which is so sad, is covering it correctly. Nobody understands why Israel have to keep fighting until Islam is completely gone and exterminated. They don't understand why Netanyahu says we have to exterminate Hamas and anybody who sides with them. Nobody is wanting to get it. There is an enemy, and enemies have to be punished. But enemies make it tough to go through justice, to go through a legal system. Because especially when they take over power. The Book of Mormon warns us of that. And so here, Joseph Smith is warning us of the evil powers of Christianity. That those who are Christian are all corrupt. Not just the preachers, but the members of Christianity. Because they draw near to the scriptures with their lips, but their hearts are far from the Jewish Christ. Because they're waiting for Jesus. They believe in Jesus. And that's why in many of my videos over the years, when Mormons attack me, I'm able to constantly educate my audience with the simple Bible lessons. Beam and mote. How to judge. And this is where Christians don't get it, just like Mormons. Mormons accuse me of being an antichrist when they're the antichrist by calling me the antichrist. And it's even worse when it's to me. Mormons do not understand. And forgiveness for this time around, there is no forgiveness. The enemy is going to destroy you. They are using you to attack me, and then they're going to destroy you so that the church can get their kingdom back. Because that's who Joseph Smith is going to talk about. Because in the second vision, he quotes Malachi with an adjustment. Because Christians believe Jesus and his second coming is going to burn people and then coup governments. But Joseph Smith adds, "For they that come shall burn them, saith the Lord of hosts." If you're a Mormon, you're reading that and you're going, oh, that's Jesus. That's the words of Jesus spoken through Malachi, if we had the correct Malachi book. Okay, so Jesus says that they who come shall burn them, saith Jesus. So Jesus is not going to come for a second coming and burn people. But every single president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints keeps repeating, Jesus is going to burn you. You better pay your protection racket tithing. Just like Emperor Sargon. And it's worse under Oakes, who's about to take over the reign of power, as Nelson is on his deathbed, who 3 times this year, preparing Mormons for the burning, to tell them, don't fear the reaper, Mormons. Resurrection is literal. And yet that's exactly who Joseph Smith is saying is the enemy. Go back to verse 1. Owing to the many reports which have been put in circulation by evil disposed and designing persons in relation to the rise and progress of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, all of which have been designed by the authors thereof to militate against its character as a church and its progress in the world. Travis, it says the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Oh, you shouldn't have gone there. Are you aware of the Joseph Smith papers? The original source documents. I am still shocked and surprised that the church had the audacity to publish it. Gerald and Sandra Tanner had already been doing it. And the church kept attacking them to shut them down for doing that. Only to just say, here it is. And even put on the website, the homepage, the authoritative source for all things Joseph Smith. Which means this is no longer authoritative. The Joseph Smith papers are. And so wouldn't you know it, it is the Church of the Latter-day Saints. Which means section 115 is a forged document. Which means there's a whole bunch of other forged documents. Because we find out that it is Willard Richards who put in Jesus Christ in the document. And it was some years later, because Jesus Christ is a thicker, bolder ink than the fading original in 1838. It's not 40 years yet, like some other forged documents like section 116. But it was after Joseph died that Willard Richards went in and changed things. And so section 117, oh my God, when you put that together with the affidavit of Thomas B. Marsh, oh, you just found the enemy. And his name is Brigham Young. Joseph Smith, in writing this, set a trap for the enemy he knew would tamper with it. And if you're a Mormon and you've listened to this point and you're offended and you're upset with me, you're supporting the enemy. I am not speaking falsehoods here. All of this, I have done the research, I have done the videos for you. I have whole pictures that are needing to be put in order. And it's getting way too out of control. And so, Thomas B. Marsh exposes these Danites that Brigham Young clearly is the leader of the Danites. as he took over the church while Joseph was framed and blamed and locked up in Liberty Jail. And I've been so long without this problem, and now here it is. Where'd you go? Oh, you bastard. Deleted it. Hold on. I was enjoying not being cyber attacked for all this week after the Monday attack. And then boom, cyber attack. Dear God. Cyber attack deleting the file. That bastard. Alright. So, 1840, July 19th, Joseph Smith gives a sermon and expounds upon his parable that he gave in what we have published as section 101, starting in verse 43. Specifically referring to verse 51, as he says, "Then the enemy shall come as a thief in the night, and broke down the hedge, and the servants of the nobleman arose and were affrighted and fled, and thus the enemy did scatter the servants abroad. When the seed of these 12 olive trees are scattered abroad, they will wake up the nations of the whole earth. Even this nation will be on the very verge of crumbling to pieces and tumbling to the ground. And when the constitution is upon the brink of ruin, this people will be the staff upon which the nation shall lean. And they shall bear away the constitution away from the very verge of destruction." I don't see that happening, because Mormons went to the Capitol to poop on the walls. But then they got pardoned. But this is interesting because it's also in the parable. "Then shall the Lord go and tell all my servants who are of the strength of mine house, my young men and middle-aged, and etc., come to the land of my vineyard and fight the battle of the Lord." But this is why Brigham Young didn't publish it. "But before this, the time shall be when these who are now my friends shall become my enemies." He's already talking about an enemy from the parable that he gave for the latter days, when the Constitution would not be followed by those in government power. A coup. And now he's talking about enemies in his day. "And shall seek to take my life." Who was there in Carthage jail with Joseph? "And there are those now before me who will more furiously pursue me and more diligently seek my life, and be more bloodthirsty upon my track than ever were the Missouri mobbers." It was 1838. "You say among yourselves, as did them of old time," here it is it I, and is it I? That specific wording only comes from the Gospel of Mark, for Mars, the enemy, for the Romans. Who married Venus, which is the symbol of the inverted pentagram of Lucifer, who's also a Roman deity. And that's why the Latin Vulgate put it in the Christian version of the Bible. So that passage in Mark refers to the latter-day supper of the Lamb of the wedding feast at the Zion temple. He talks about Judas, the enemy, who will betray him. Judas was a part of the 12 apostles. Joseph is using the plural, though, not the singular. He's not saying one of you in the 12. Nope, he's saying all of you in the 12 are the enemy. My enemies shall seek to take my life. He talks about the future of an enemy threat. In the 1838 vision account, he identifies the enemy as the 12 because they did. And here he goes again. Which one's next? So with Thomas B. Marsh identifying this church, yeah, it's Doctrine and Covenants scripture. Almost had it. So yeah, it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We can even bring up Joseph Fielding Smith Sr. because they told Thomas B. Marsh they are the enemy. They are doing it. They are causing it. They are planning the coup in the future, just as the 1838 visionary account says. But in The Way to Perfection by Joseph Fielding Smith Sr., he reveals the coding. These Danites don't tell the world that they are the enemy like they told Thomas B. Marsh, who they assumed was one of them. He was the president of the 12. They were in the 12. They were converted by the 12. And so Joseph Fielding Smith Sr., the son of Hiram, I also need to, we need to, John Taylor's obituary of Joseph and Hiram getting assassinated. Remind me. John Taylor. There we go. He talks about Abominable in the future. Remember? It's a forged document. It never happened. Abominable was a secret headquarters of the Danites, according to Thomas B. Marsh, where they were storing the loot from the neighboring villages after burning down the towns, murdering the men, raping the women. They'd steal the loot, bring it to the storehouse where Noel K. Whitney was somehow made a bishop, when he wasn't made a bishop until the last year before Brigham Young died. Section 117. And so none of this is by Joseph. He thinks so because he's reading from the Danite documents from conferences. They are telling the Mormons, who are not in the inner circle of the coup in the future, that it's Jesus and Lucifer. Lucifer's the enemy. He's the one doing it. But we now know from Thomas B. Marsh that it's the Danites who are Lucifer. But yet they call themselves Jesus. In this council, Christ will take over the reins of government and shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, which is led by a living president of Jesus. Then shall Jesus give the government to the saints of the Most High. This council in the valley of Abominable is to be of the greatest importance to this world. At that time there will be a transfer of authority from the usurper and impostor Lucifer. They're calling the President of the United States of America Lucifer. Who's the President of the United States of America? Since Oakes has given 3 death threats for the coming of Jesus, who will burn everybody and coup governments. Who, when I get to little sister Jessica, said it way back in 2020, that 2020 was only going to be the test run for 2024 and 2025. Here we are, it's 2025. Huh. Who's the enemy? Who is the enemy of all scriptures? Who is the great and abominable church of Lucifer? But they are switching the roles here. It is supposed to be the Danites who are supposed to hand it over to the Jewish Christ, the law of Purim. Because the church is supposed to fall. But here they're talking about a coup. Our Lord will then assume the reins of government. The world will not know of it. The saints will not know of it. The world cannot know of it. The saints cannot know of it. How do you think Trump will feel if he understood that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is getting Trump to do their will, to hand over the government to them? That he's Lucifer and not Jesus, the chosen one, because somebody had to do it? Either nobody believes the warning message I gave to Trump and to Pam Bondi and to Kash Patel, or there's a Mormon still who's intercepted my communication, so that Trump is going to be the patsy. Just like that patsy when when JFK was assassinated, with the documents now released. Huh? Alright. Well, we're here. Well, John Taylor's quick, because it's not on the page. So, let's see, which one is it? 34? No. 35? Yes. Listen to this. Pay very close attention. Joseph Smith is Jewish. He's the Jewish Christ Messiah ben Joseph. He has been preparing Mormons for the future coming of Messiah ben David. He never named the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. To seal the testimony of this book and the Book of Mormon, we announce the martyrdom of Joseph Smith the prophet. interesting. The Danites were calling him the seer when he wasn't in town with their publication of the Times and Seasons, and sent it to Brigham Young after he fled the country to Europe. And Hiram Smith the Patriarch. They were shot in Carthage jail on the 27th of June, 1844, about 5 o'clock p.m. No, we gotta check. No, no, we gotta do it. Gotta do it, because this is a scandal. Jail and the watch. And we'll go back to little sister Jessica. Yeah, it's 4:16. So, 45 minutes away from 5. It's his watch, Maybe he can't tell time. The church, of course, when people recognize that from the manual on the church history that I obtained while I was at Rick's, which was part of the September 6th scandal, the church pulled it off and took out the picture from the manual and redid it. By an armed mob, painted black, from 150 to 200 persons, Hiram was shot first and fell calmly, exclaiming, "I am a dead man." Every year I do the tribute to Joseph and Hiram about Carthage jail and what really happened. John Taylor was the one who shot Hiram first and fell calmly, exclaiming, "I am a dead man." Joseph leaped from the window. No. He was at the top of the stairs. Right, Oakes? You published it in your book that was the case, and then you created stuff that didn't make any sense and has no basic in the forensic evidence of the crime scene. Joseph Smith stood at the top of the stairs with the 6-shooter. Hiram had the single shot of my 3rd-grade grandfather. John Taylor tried to wrestle it away from Hiram, shot him up in the jaw, felled him to the ground. Whether he was able to speak and say, "I am a dead man," the other legitimate witness was also murdered. And so, Joseph, seeing and hearing the gunshot and his pistol shot, seeing his brother on the floor, John Taylor standing over the body, Joseph then turned into the room, boom, 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 3 more balls into John Taylor. John Taylor has more than 3 balls in him, plus the one in the watch that stopped the time. Which means Willard Richards had a 6-shooter. That's when he got it, when he went out for the sacrament. And so, yeah, that's why I joke about Willard Richards telling John Taylor to hold still. Quit being a baby. Because when Joseph Smith chased John Taylor under the bed, he went over his brother weeping and mourning. And Willard Richards snuck from the corner that he was cowering in with the 6-shooter that he had, shot Joseph in the back, took his body to the window and dumped it out, where the mob then shot him multiple times. over and over again with their long musket rifles. And so that's why this is appalling for the one who was involved to write this. But we're not done yet. He gets worse. Joseph leaped from the window and was shot dead in the attempt, exclaiming, "O Lord my God." They were both shot after they were dead in a brutal manner. No, only Joseph. Hiram was shot, the final kill shot, right here, while lying on the ground by Willard Richards, who came back over. Boom. So Willard Richards still has 4 more balls, and put a couple in John Taylor. Hold still! John Taylor and Willard Richards, 2 of the 12, contradicted their testimonies of the events that occurred, such that neither could be believed as true, and thus were suspicious that they were in on it. We're the only persons in the room at the time. Did you catch that? In lying, they expose the truth. The former was wounded in a savage manner with 4 balls. Okay, only 1. And so maybe that was the shot in the watch. But since recovered, the latter, through the providence of God, escaped without even a hole in his robe. And yet somehow Hiram also was shot multiple times in the room. No. No. Here it is. Pay attention. Who is the Christ? Joseph Smith, the prophet and seer of the Lord. Seer is greater than a prophet, isn't it? Has done more save Jesus only. The enemy, it rears his ugly head for the salvation of men in this world than any other man that has ever lived in it. John Taylor exposes himself as Christian, Jesus believer. Demotes Joseph Smith as the man like Moses. Section 107, verse 91. It is easy to identify the enemy. Not complicated at all. Okay, little sister Jessica. Okay. Don't you mess with me again. I'm already pissed with you today. Doing a live deleting of my files. March 26th, 2020. President and Sister Marquis are called to serve in the Australia mission as mission president and wife. And he, at least, is in the missionary training meeting in Las Vegas, Nevada on the 14th of March 2020. And so, when he gets out into the field, he sends a letter to stake presidents and parents on the 26th. And he quotes from the guest speaker, Dallin H. Oaks, who spoke in chiasmus and said, "This is not the end of the world, but merely a test, a trial run for the second coming." they that come, who are Christian, shall burn them. They who are of my 12, their descendants, shall come as Christian and burn them. Is this different presentation now coming to your mind of all its horror that this church is? Everything they have been doing this whole time is setting things up for now. For 200 years they have been plotting, they have been planning, they have been setting things up. They have been doing all that they've done in church history to this final solution, all to get their kingdom back, to mass murder people, because 2020, remember? Did you forget already? And coup the government. Oakes says it's them who cooed the government, not Trump. Trump is just their puppet. And here we are in 2024 and 2025, when Oakes said, this is no longer a test run. This is no longer a trial run. This is the second coming. All thanks to little sister Jessica, who posted it on her mission website. Know the enemy, so that you will not be caught unawares. So, as I go over the Passover scriptures and stuff, this church is the enemy in all of them. The enemy of Joshua is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The enemy of Esther is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Esau is the enemy of Jacob. Jacob is the enemy. It is his descendant who is going to be the Christ, which is hilarious. So, all the stories, some of them more blatantly obvious now than others. Samson was a Danite. Not a coincidence. Not a coincidence. And so, yes, Lucifer, the head of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Just so happens to be that that's Russell Marion's baby name meaning. Mars, the red star of the sea, married to Venus, the inverted pentagram. Lucifer, on the doors of the Salt Lake City Temple, on the keystone of the Eagle Gate, on the keystone of the window of the Logan Temple, and also Brigham Young put it on the Nauvoo Temple to show that he had assassinated Joseph, usurped his Jewish new Israelite religion by putting the inverted pentagram at the position of the sun god at noonday. See, most people just see that and go, oh, inverted pentagram, that's Lucifer. Look where it's placed. The Jewish star is at the top, and then Joseph is at the bottom as the rising sun on the horizon. the omega symbol, sunstone. Isaiah makes it very clear why Venus, as the symbol of Lucifer, never gets to the noonday position. Because it's too close to the sun. Whenever Venus is making its way to go to the noonday position, the sun rises, blinds it from the world because of the glory of his brightness. That's what they're talking about. Sign in the heaven and the likeness of things on the earth.